Welcome to the Kale Houser Leadership Secrets podcast. Today it is my privilege to bring to you Mike Lougee, insurance agency for a Fortune 50 company. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Kale Houser Leadership Secrets podcast. My name is Kale Houser. I am happy to host this incredible gentleman that I got an opportunity to meet and talk with a couple of weeks ago at an event that we were at mutually. His name is Mike Lougee. It's a kind of a unique spelling, and I keep wanting to do it in the French way, but he is a small business owner and insurance agency for a Fortune 50 company. Mr. Mike, thank you so much for joining me and being willing to donate your time and benefit my audience.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. This is great.
Yeah. Ever since our conversation that we had, really just kind of ad hoc as we were hanging out, I've been thinking a lot about some of the things that we talked about. But I do want to start with, because you are a small business owner, tell us a little bit about your business and the dynamics, how many employees you have, just so my audience kind of has an idea of where you're coming from, how long you've been doing it, those types of things.
Sure. Well, like I said to you, I'm kind of the epitome of a small business. I have 5 employees, and I've grown from just one. It was just me and really just this little old lady who kind of ran the store before I came through, and have grown my business 4 or 5-fold, I guess, in terms of volume and activity and employees. But I sell and service insurance for a large company. Essentially, we are a sales office, but our job is to service the customers that we already have. So we do spend a lot of time just taking care of all the customers we already have, with the competition of trying to grow on a regular basis or fighting off a declining market or whatever it might be that's causing us trouble. But I've been doing it for about 15 years now. Prior to that, I worked with that same company in their marketing department and in the claims department. So I came to the job with all this internal corporate experience with the same company that now I own a slice of, and get to build a team that really goes from true service, which would be a claim situation, to just selling the stuff. And so the insurance is a promise. We don't have a product. You don't get any tangible item. You just get a promise.
Slip of paper, yeah.
Exactly. And a lot of times, people, that's a frustrating part of that industry for a consumer. But essentially, I worked in the part where we fulfilled the promise, and then I had to turn around and sell it. So that gave me a little bit of unique perspective to it, in that I knew what I was selling. I had a really good knowledge of my product because I knew what would happen if you ever need this darn thing. So.
Right. Can you talk to us a little bit about what made you want to make that jump? Because obviously you committed to it. You've been doing it the last 15 years.
Yeah.
What made you move from being the employee, a traditional employee in a corporation, versus going out on your own, accepting that risk and making it happen? What was there an event?
Yeah, I had a lot of personal resistance to it. I did not want to be your, stereotypical insurance salesman. It just turned me off. It wasn't who I am. It wasn't who I was at the time. And I met with a gentleman, a good friend of mine, who was an agent, and he really talked more about the job of a salesman isn't necessarily to sell whatever's in front of you. It's about coaching a client into understanding what their problems are. It's just, find a need and fill it. That's pretty traditional sales 101. But he took an approach to it as a coach. And so if I could coach him, say, hey, look, this is where you have issues. This is where you can make improvements. Maybe this is things you don't need to do. Let me help you with your life and some of the challenges that I can take care of. And then the sales will just come from it. And if you can communicate well, if you're trusted, hopefully you have some genuineness to you and some integrity, and can convey that, they will buy your product. And then, you deal with pricing and all that fun stuff. But essentially, I'm just a coach. What do you want? What do you want to avoid? Insurance is about avoiding, a catastrophe. So let's manage that. People, it's like an unnecessary evil in your life. You've got to deal with, you've got to purchase. So let's make this a less evil and a more necessary purchase, right?
Yeah. And I like that, because I I would assume, or at least based on my perspective, that most people don't think of their insurance agent as a coach, as somebody that's there for them beyond just here, here's this policy that that you're required to have by law for your vehicle or your house or whatever, for your mortgage requirements. But it absolutely is that, because just like you said, insurance is about, mitigating risk and taking some of those catastrophe moments out of play. And people need to be educated about that, because hey, in my public school upbringing, no one ever told me about all the bad things that could happen, and the ways that, you could really fall into that hole and never get out without some of these things. And I think that's an absolute correct and needs to be spread more way to think about insurance, and especially insurance agents. Yeah.
Yeah. So it just allowed me to get over the hesitation I had of being some sort of slimy salesman.
Right. Yeah.
And then,
Obviously
I had worked through the corporation to where I had opportunities to develop myself to become a manager and a leader. And ultimately, I wasn't able to secure those jobs based on my limitation of moving, to be honest with you. It was back in the day where you showed some of your loyalty to your corporation by how willing you were to take on the jobs that everybody has to do. Everybody has to work in this location or in this department. And I just, I had an opportunity for 2 jobs, and I went in for one job but not the other. And they're like, "Why didn't you put in? I thought you wanted to be a manager." I said, "I do, but I don't want to live there." And I don't think that was necessarily held against me. I don't think there was some like, "Well, he's not a team player," but I probably would have got the job at the other location. And I came back from that interview, or when I found out that I wasn't selected, and I went to a recruiter friend of mine and I said, "Tell me more about this agency thing." And then that just kind of developed into the opportunity. And then I worked with agents, and I saw that, I'm fit for this. This will work. I can communicate with people. I was passionate about what we did already because I was already doing it. I just didn't make money from what I was selling. I was spending money as a claims adjuster.
Yeah, and because you got to see the benefits of it, people that, unfortunate enough to be in whatever situation, and you got to see, this is a legitimate thing, and it's absolutely helpful to people. That's cool.
Yeah. And so then I, started out like anybody else, and it was scary and hard and difficult. And like I said, I inherited an employee that had been with the prior person that I took over.
Right.
And they just ran the whole thing. So I had a lot of benefits from just having someone who knew everything. And then I had to build this empire, I guess, from scratch.
Let's talk about that, because we talked a little bit about some of the unique things. At least that was my impression of some of the unique things that you were doing in your agency with your employees, and how, especially with compensation and things, that was different than the norm. So talk to us about building, over the last couple of years, building your team up to 5, and then some of the things that you have done that you feel have made the improvements and made you more of a cohesive team instead of just having employees.
Yeah, you get, there's the training you get on this is other people. They kind of tell you how to do things. You're taking a full commission job as an agent, and then you're hiring hourly employees, right? My company's paying me based on what I do, but I'm going to turn around and pay my employees based on showing up, right? So you obviously have to create goals and quotas and incentives and all the fun things that we do as employers to get our people to work hard.
Right.
And everything I was taught was you pay a commission and you hit certain levels and the commission goes up and down depending on what you sell.
Yeah.
And I always hated it. I hated the tracking of it. I always hated the idea of an employee doing something that took a lot of work, and that particular work made him $9 or $81. Clearly, if they look at it from, well, if I sell something for $81 20 times, it's a nice paycheck. But the moment it happens, $80, it's just like, oh, great, knowing that your boss man probably made more than that. Not that we did necessarily, but there was always that misunderstanding. Because you never told them you would never tell your employees what you make.
Heaven forbid, yeah.
And sometimes you would tell them, I'm going to give you all of what I make on this, but you would always hold out a little bit to pay the taxes associated with that. I mean, you never want to give it away. I did that for years. And I hated it. I just hated it. I talked to a friend of mine who said, I got rid of it one time. I got rid of commissions. Pay people what they're worth and they'll work hard for you. And it always stuck in my head. And so, to be honest, that sort of fell into this. I had a mixture of employees, kind of sales and service, and I paid them differently. And that's even a bigger headache. And then I noticed that the employees that got paid a salary, for lack of a better word, would take work from the salespeople because they knew I would have to pay them and they thought they were saving me money. And then I had salespeople getting frustrated because they were being taken sales away, or they would get tied down in a service issue and they would bicker a little bit and there was some frustration. And then he had to keep it all secret, what do I make from this sale? And it's just a hassle. I have some friends that are successful with it. There's 1,000 tools out there that help you track it. It just didn't work for me, and I got frustrated with it. So I lost an employee that was primarily sales, and I said, I'm done with it. We're just going to go strictly, I'm going to pay an hourly rate. I'm going to pay you a competitive rate, and then that's going to give me the flexibility to be generous when I can be generous. Now, I think that's the key, is if I looked at it as I'm saving all this money and I'm just going to buy me a boat, then
Exactly.
you're probably going to get employees that don't feel it. So I have a tendency to just do spot rewards. And if I see something I like, I reward it with cash or something else. And if we have a good month, I share the wealth. It's not on a schedule. Every time I do it, I say this is not indicative of a future. And I tell them,
Right.
hey, I did the same thing and you gave me money. Now I'm not. What's up with that? So you got to be a little bit more open. Sat them all down, explained to them how I was paid, how I'm evaluated, what goals we have to do. What if we don't hit those goals? What happens to me? What's the revenue stream to me loss? Who's going to absorb that revenue stream decline? And so that helped. And then I didn't announce this to everybody saying this is what we're going to do. I just did it.
Yeah.
And since I've done it, I feel that my folks are loyal. They want to see me do well because they know they will do well. They encourage each other. They don't work for the sale, they work for the client. It fits nicely into that. I certainly don't hit goals and markers that other people have. This may not work for you in your situation, but I'm happier. My team loves me. I love them.
Yeah.
This is an example today. I bought them. I hired a masseuse to come in and give them all back massages.
Nice.
We just got back from lunch, and I mean, they just like me. And I have a good team.
Yeah.
They fit into this model, and I've had people that don't fit.
Sure.
And if there is somebody I end up hiring that says I want to make a lot of money, I would give them, okay, do this, and there's a reward at the end. So I would still implement some type of reward for the work that was done.
Sure.
And there's certain products we sell that I say, yeah, I'm going to pay you whatever the commission is on that. But it's not based on quotas, number of phone calls you make that day, how many appointments you set, what did you close this week. I want them all here to be career employees with a long-term plan. Because I think a lot of those people just churn through employees, burn them out. They make a lot of
Smoke them
money,
while you got them. Yeah.
but their sophomore year, they just fall apart because they're sick of it. And then you have to do that over and over again. It takes so long to train people, it takes so long to find people. I would rather have career employees, for sure.
Was that scary for you to do that? Because I think a lot of business owners, especially small business owners, where your team is, relatively small, to have that level of transparency with your employees, with your staff, was there any apprehension? Was there like, I don't know how they're going to respond to this, or it was just the natural thing for you to do?
Well, for many of them, it was already natural because that's how I had already developed uh, their pay, their compensation.
Okay.
But absolutely, it's terrifying because
Right.
you don't know how they're going to respond to it.
Yeah.
And I'm very aware of that because you think, do they look at it? Because I'm very hesitant to say what I make, but I am always I concentrate on what the revenue for this business is. It just happens to be what they pay me. So any kind of business, if you're selling lawnmowers, the lawnmower company you're selling for is giving you a cut of the sales, and then that person uses the cut of the sales to pay their staff.
Right.
So it's all about revenue. So I try to focus on that, mostly because I'm self-conscious of it. Because I guess I've been around enough people to see that employees will sometimes say, well, I'm working my tail off and this guy's got a new car. And I want my employees to be excited I got a new car.
Yeah.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like from a
Yeah.
human level, not resentful.
Right. Yeah.
So,
Celebrate the successes. Yeah.
right. So, and I'm not a flashy person, so I don't do all that kind of stuff. But to answer your question, I was terrified that if you let them in too much, then they'll start doing the calculations every time they're doing something. And they'll see it as like, oh my gosh, I just made this guy all this money and I got a pat on the back. Well, one, you got to be committed to not just doing a pat on the back. There's got to be more to it.
Yeah.
And then two, obviously, you have to be comfortable letting them know that. So I don't care. It's worked, but you're right, absolutely terrifying.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Because I
I don't
think,
get into super detailed numbers because it's irrelevant.
right.
Now it's relevant because they're making a salary, and I hopefully
Yeah,
um,
you're not shooting everybody copies of your tax returns at the end of the year or anything like
right.
that for that kind of transparency. But I think you touched on something about how this created this loyalty, and it's so fascinating to me. And I've talked about this in previous podcasts as well. Of having that little bit of vulnerability, that transparency, and that honesty with your staff has just this weird, and I think it's just human nature. When people are vulnerable, we kind of tend to trust them more, that because they've opened up to us. And I think from what I'm hearing is you're kind of seeing the results of that and how your team is performing and their
Yes.
loyalty to you and your company, which is pretty amazing. But you are
Yeah.
also doing your end to not be like, hey, I'm got my Lambo parked out front, and I'll see you guys, next week. I'm headed to Cabo, kind of thing. It's not. And the same thing I wanted to mention, for those that do potentially, because you're talking a little bit of maybe jealousy or a mismatch of effort versus reward. But I would assume it's not like you're saying, you can never do what I've done. You can offer people, if they want to become an agent and open their own small business and take on that risk and all those types of things. I would imagine you are there to be a mentor for them if that's a career
Yeah.
path that they want to do, right?
Yeah. And individually, I spend lots of time with it on them. What can make your what do you want?
Yeah, yeah,
What is it that you need? Like, it might be that they just want to go home earlier in the day,
right,
or
right.
um,
Yeah. Yeah, we
uh,
could do a whole nother hour about getting into the goals and wants and desires
right.
of each of your employees and how to use that effectively and be involved in that process.
Right,
Yeah.
but the loyalty, you touched on a good point with the loyalty thing, is I still have all the same problems that any small business have. I happen to have four females that work in the office consistently, and they have their dynamics with each other all the time.
Yeah,
The ones who have older kids are different with the ones who have younger kids, and there's just a different lifestyle that all of them have.
sure.
But I had that before. And so now I don't have that added element of, a customer comes in and says, hey, I want to do business with you. Who do I give it to? Do I give it to the person I'm going to have to pay, the person I know is going to do it for nothing, the person who's going to do it right? All these different, I've taken that off the table and I can develop them. And I asked them before we had this conversation, this is what I'm going to tell them. Am I right?
Right.
And, you know, Uh, maybe you should have podcasts with them. I don't know, but
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
the
Here's the real scoop on what goes down at the, the
but that's the
agency.
difference. I think that's the thing is I can go to them and ask them, do you want to go to some sort of hierarchy of sales, and because I can give you $50 an hour and say, this is what you're going to do. Or I can give you $40 an hour and say what you're going to have to do to get the other $10. You're still got to hold them accountable. And I do. But the accountability is based on, I show them, hey, this is where we need to be. If we don't make it, these are the consequences. So then there's like a group effort. Well, we're going to need to do this because one, it's the right thing to do because we're helping people, and two, yeah, I'm gonna suffer consequences from it. So
Yeah.
I just like it because I enjoy coming to work. They enjoy coming to work,
Yeah,
and
and it seems like it's absolutely, or it sounds like it's working for you. So that's, and certainly everything's, an in progress experiment. Like that's like with everything, as people come in and out of your office through all different aspects. And I want to touch on that a little bit. And we don't have to spend a lot of time because I know I want to be respectful of your time here tonight. Talk to us a little bit about finding talent, as you're getting ready to expand or, go through that process. How do you approach that, kind of big picture as the business owner? What are you looking for? Do you have a process for that, or you just kind of throw that, Craigslist ad out there and what you get is what you get?
I certainly don't know the Craigslist, but
Yeah.
I've done everything.
Okay.
I've really done everything. I mean, back in the day, you used to put an ad in the newspaper,
Yeah.
and you paid $500 for this little line, and it was ridiculous. So I do all the normal things. There's lots of websites out there that you can connect to. You can advertise on lots of different platforms. Ultimately, though, you and I had this conversation about it's important that you weed everybody out. You don't want to have 50 interviews because you got 50 applications. You got to have some process to kind of eliminate something.
Yeah.
And then, because you're going to waste a lot of time. And then you also you're very hesitant because you're afraid you're going to ignore the person that could have been the shining star.
Yeah.
There's a lot of luck involved. But what I have found that has helped the best is I bring in somebody, in this case, my office manager, to help identify who we're going to eliminate and who we're going to call.
Okay.
And so that you just need another set of eyes. And sometimes that person is completely off. It's interesting to watch an employee help with hiring decisions from an employee's perspective, and their expectations are different, their criteria is totally different. They're much more judgmental. They much more. It's like, man, if you were in charge of this, we'd never have anybody. No one's ever good enough. So
Right.
I always focus on, are they coachable? Are they nice? All that fun, all the normal stuff. But the
Yeah.
other thing that I do is when we narrow it down to an interview, I usually have a one-on-one interview with the person, and I have veto power. But then I let the team make the call.
Okay.
Um, I don't give them anybody that I would not want, but I have them interview them, and they have a 4 or 5 person interview. Sometimes I'll go around to the different offices and sit with them for 30 minutes. And I tell the employees what to ask all these same questions, see how they answer them differently, and then give me your opinion. And then we get together, and they'll have their ups and positives and negatives, and because these people have to work together, they have to like each other. And
Really
plus, it gives
interesting.
me a little bit of like, oh, you hired this crazy person who's ruined the office, and then it's not my fault,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
they have a
Just
lot
because
more money.
you're Yeah, because your kids are in the same soccer team or something. Like, yeah, it has to go a little bit
Right.
beyond that.
Right. Let's just get away from all that. And that's been the helpful. So that is the two. If I'm talking to anybody who's trying this out, like bring in some other set of eyes and never let your spouse, someone like a friend, because they don't know your interest, but somebody in your business help you do it. So you have just set another set of eyes.
Yeah.
And then get your team involved in helping selecting people. It is a challenge. This market is horrible, but honestly, I find it interesting. The people who complain about it, they want this perfect fit, and they're just not out there. I don't. I went through the whole taking tests and personality exams and all that stuff, and I ended up hiring the people that did poorer on the test because this is a communication job, and And I've also learned that their accuracy in those tests, because you really want to make sure they know how to type, answer the
Right.
phone, speak with some common sense, do some basic math. So those things
Yeah.
are important. Um, I do fun things in I'm like I do this trick where I send an email out to the candidate and I say, tell me what made you interested in this job.
Okay.
And could you email me and my office manager? And I'll say that in the so one, do they read instructions correctly?
Yeah.
Because a lot of times they'll pick up the phone and call me. And so they didn't read the email, or they won't carbon copy my office manager,
Right.
or they'll just type out a resume. And the ones who do it right, it's like, I just really I'm interested in what you do. And they did, I don't want a resume. Just tell me what made you click my job.
Yeah.
And that's helped really well, just because if you can't follow an instruction on an email that's really simple,
Yeah.
you're not going to take a voicemail message very well, or you're going
Right.
to have other problems. So,
Or handle customers.
yeah,
Absolutely. Yeah. It's very basic stuff. That little
yeah,
bit of attention to detail, which isn't even that much detail at that point. Yeah.
no,
Beyond,
no.
potentially paying out
Super
people
easy.
hundreds of thousands of dollars and stuff. That's really cool. Now we're getting ready, as when this podcast comes out, we're wrapping up 2022. What are there certain things that you transition to start focusing on in the next month and a half or so before you wrap up your year as a small business
Yeah,
owner besides
I think
taxes?
yeah. There's all the end of the year is always fun because you do all these guys, all these people out there have quotas and they got to wrap up their year, and it's the worst time to do any of that stuff because you want to enjoy it. But one
Yeah.
of the things that I do is at the end of the year we try to do uh, at the very minimum a closed office meeting with everybody, and we plan out our next year. And again, I can hand them a list of what we're going to do next year. Then it's my goals or it's my employer's goals. But I ask them, what do you guys want to do? This is what we did last year. This is what we're going to sort of be required to do. And what do you think we can do? So we usually have a couple of retreat type meetings where we dive into our next year because that January February time period, the board's empty, there's nothing on there, and everybody's flipping out.
Yeah.
It helps them. We coalesce as a team. We usually do something fun. Um, we're in Wyoming, so we went shooting. We shot guns last year, and there's
Nice.
this place in town you can shoot guns, and
Yeah.
which is again that's a trust level if you want to take your employees out with live
Yeah.
ammunition.
And
But it
there's
worked
the
great.
next
So
lane.
just
Yeah.
that's the biggest thing is just bring him in on the goals so then there's no question and then revisit those goals regularly.
Nice. Nice.
Yeah.
Now I do ask all my guests this because, everyone has an opinion on this, and I certainly have my own. When you think of in a business sense the difference between a leader or a manager, what comes to your mind? How do you delineate those two things? How do you define them? Are they different? What's your opinion on
Yeah, I
that?
don't operate from that definition. I mean, I don't think
Right.
about it. My style is a leader would just be the fact that I do things. A leader does it, and a manager might watch it, sort of navigate it. I'm pretty hands-on in my business, so I'm a doer. So they hear me talk to people. They see me. I can do everything in the office. I've run into that with other people in my business. They don't know how to do something. They have team members who do all that stuff.
Yeah.
And I don't like that. I can't handle not knowing how it works.
Yeah.
So, anytime you go into management training, you got to learn every step in the building, how to do everything. That's me. I know how to do everything.
Yeah.
And that gives me credibility. And I don't like I mean, I'm not a hyper, let me jump in and do it for you,
Right.
but I know how to do it. So then I'm a competent resource for them to come to. So that's how I would do it. Leadership are people who do it. They're out on the front, right, with the gun and they're taking them down. Whereas a manager might be, hey, let me know when you guys get there and I'll evaluate your situation.
Right.
And
Right.
that's
Did you
how
have enough ammo to get through all those
right, that's
types of
how
things? Yeah.
both are important, but
Sure.
that's how I operate. And that's how I define the two roles for sure.
Love it. Yeah. Great. That's a unique definition that I hadn't heard yet from any of my guests. So thank you for that. That's pretty
Yeah.
neat. I like thinking about it that way. Um, So now, as people have been listening to you, they're like, man, this guy Mike's got it together. How do people get into your world if they want to, connect with you? Maybe we've got a listener in Wyoming that is looking, and how do people get a hold of you? What's the best way?
Well, the easiest way is just to go to my website. It's 577mike.com, and it's my business address. And then I'm on Facebook and in the insurance world in Casper, Wyoming. So I'm pretty easy to find. But 577mike.com, you can get a hold of me. You can email me, and you can at least see what I do. Absolutely.
Yeah. Absolutely. Sweet. And there will be links to that, whether you're watching on YouTube or listening on your podcast platform. There'll be links to Mike's website and his email and things of that nature. So please do reach out to him and follow him on Facebook to be apprised of what he's got going on. Mike, thank you so much for joining me. And this has been incredible. I appreciate you so much and your willingness to spend your afternoon with me and provide this valuable content and tips and advice that through the struggles you've had as a small business owner and the things you've learned through the hard times as well as the good. So thank you so much.
You're welcome. I like what you're doing. Keep it up. Good luck to you. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, everybody. Thank you for joining the Kale Houser Leadership Secrets podcast. It's my pleasure to host Mr. Mike Lougee. Make sure you subscribe to his Facebook as well as his website and keep track of what he's got going on. No matter where you're at in the world, have a fantastic afternoon. Bye.